The bottom line is that when China has issues, it always blames the outsiders. And as you can see right here, our camera has suddenly stopped. Recently learned, of course, that this camera is from a Chinese company. Something strange happened while I was recording this video. The video would oftentimes stop recording without any warning, without any reason, without an error message whatsoever. I'd previously used this camera several times and had not had the issue. Later on, I found out that it is indeed a Chinese branded camera, which raises more than an eyebrow given the context of this video. I did record the audio and video separately on different devices, so I am still able to give you the audio when the video cuts out. I added checker boxes in post to signify when the video cuts out. Please bear with the rough edits, and whether this is a coincidental bug or not is up to you to decide. Thank you. So, the purpose of this video is to help people avoid pitfalls and extreme disaster, potentially, with Chinese people and the Chinese culture. This is based off of my own experience with the Chinese and the experiences of others. I know a lot of people are going to hate it. Feel free to leave a comment down below. I don't care if you don't like it, because I know that if you do have this knowledge in mind when dealing with Chinese culture, it's going to help you a lot in the long run and make things make a lot more sense as well. So, in no particular order, the first tip I have for you is that psychopathy is so common that it's a silently accepted normal mode of behavior in China. Psychopathy here being characterized as the lack of a conscience and complete disregard for the consequences of one's own actions. When you look at a lot of the atrocities currently going on in China, Uyghur genocide, organ harvesting, falun-gong, practitioner persecution, and just the regular abuse that employees have to go through from their employers because they have no rights, this starts to make a lot more sense in that light. China also destroyed its own culture during the Cultural Revolution by eliminating the Four Olds. Don't let Chinese people tell you they have 5,000 years of continuous history. They really don't. They actually don't even have their old culture anymore. They're currently living in a shadow of their former culture because they destroyed it, right? The old ideas, old culture, old customs, old habits, that's everything. This has led to a populace that doesn't respect anything beyond sheer authoritarian power and material gain. After losing its cultural background, that's, in my opinion, when China really, truly became morally bankrupt. Guanxi, an often talked about academic concept in scholarly circles that's revered as a cultural artifact, complete baloney. It's simply nepotism with an Eastern spin, okay? It's old boy rules. You scratch my back, I scratch your back. Guanxi is despised by some lower class Chinese for depressing social mobility. Independent heroism in the idea of one person toppling an overwhelming foe, such as in David and Goliath, is not part of China's zeitgeist. The Chinese will never rebel against an oppressive ruler because social harmony over any type of conflict is believed to be a noble goal. A lot of observers of China in the West often think, oh, one day they're just going to have an American-style revolution and everything's going to be peachy keen roses afterwards. No, that's not going to happen. And this is one of the cultural elements of China that is very consistent throughout time. It's not going to happen. A lot of Chinese people are so brainwashed to the point, unfortunately, in general, that they really do prefer their subjugation. Believe it or not, that does happen. Mao Zedong coined the term politically correct, fun fact, to describe the illogical beliefs of his brainwashed citizens. They won't be correct, but they will be politically correct. Modern China is simply a redressing broadly speaking, of its former self under imperial, despotic rule. Xi Jinping acts as emperor, while his subordinate noble class either allies with him or plots to overtake him. Some of the key figureheads switch out over time, going from, Jiang Zemin, so on and so forth. But overall, the structure remains the same. You have the emperor, his elite class, and then peasants. It's my opinion that eventually China will repeat its own history and break apart into several nation states that will then once again, war with each other. Even within China itself, there's a lot of racism against different people from other parts of China. China is actually a terrible custodian of Chinese culture. After killing off their scholar class, any remaining scholars fled to Taiwan or Japan. Japan nowadays is a better source for Chinese cultural preservation than mainland China. Most Chinese people, as I mentioned before, truly believe CCP propaganda and genuinely want China to overpower existing nations through war or other means. This is an open hostility that many foreigners have experienced while being in China. It's not in a soft, nice, all-inclusive, we're going to help each other hold hands. No, it's open hostility towards other nations. Those who know the CCP lie regularly, those Chinese people who know they are lying regularly, still don't know how to access the truth, and oftentimes avoid learning the truth because it would be equivalent to learning that they're inside the Truman Show. Honestly, I've heard it described that way. The CCP has never won a war against a foreign nation. That's partly why, in my opinion, a lot of Chinese are so warmongering, why the government today is such a warmonger, pushing into the Southern Asian Sea. They don't know the impact of war. They don't know the fallout of war. They don't have that generational understanding anymore of the horrors of war and what it can bring about. The Taiwanese government defeated Japan in World War II. Let me say that again. The Taiwanese government defeated Japan in World War II. The CCP essentially sucker punched them after the war was already over, and the Taiwanese government was exhausted. Their military was beleaguered. They had just fought a world war. Racism is not openly discussed in China. This is a big one, and is in fact an accepted fact of life. It's not discussed at all. This is not an open public debate like it is in the West. There's no one rearing against racism in China. It's completely normal and uncontroversial. If you're a social justice warrior type, more power to you. But your main target, I'm talking about a regular social justice warrior from the West, your main target should be to reform China, not the West. Yes, the West does have its problems, but it's a molehill compared to a mountain, okay? In China, the Chinese state media recently said African foreigners in China hunt and prey. Chinese state media recently came out and said that African foreigners in China hunt, prey, and pick fruit. Imagine that being said on mainstream media, MSNBC, over in the States. It would be a complete disaster. But that's business as usual over in China. China's racism goes far beyond Jim Crow laws or segregation. Keep in mind that historically China has had the most prolific slave trade in the world. Okay? Up until European powers made them stop. Chinese struggle with understanding sarcasm. This is kind of funny. And it's my opinion that they have trouble understanding sarcasm because in order to get sarcasm, you need to know the underlying truth of what's being said. For the past several years, China has been scapegoating foreigners and recently denied black people access to their own homes. A lot of racism also occurs against people who are not black in China as well. Um, it's extremely sad when it happens to anybody, to be honest. What the Apologies for the editing break. The camera that I'm using currently keeps turning off. What the For the past several years, China has scapegoated foreigners, recently denying black people access to their own homes. This is nothing new. One example of this throughout history is that in 1898, China blamed foreigners and Chinese Christians. China blamed foreigners and Chinese Christians for natural disasters like floods and droughts. Think about that for a moment. Foreigners being blamed for natural disasters. With support from the Empress Dowager, the Boxer Revolt was codified. An imperial decree went out and declared war on all foreigners. The bottom line is that when China has issues, it always blames the outsiders. And as you can see right here, our camera has suddenly stopped. Recently learned, of course, that this camera is from a Chinese company. This has been occurring off and on now, about 7 times throughout this speech. The recording suddenly stopping at random times when I'm critiquing China. Get it? China never changes in some regards. This is constant. In my opinion, it's only a matter of time, call me crazy, before they start killing foreigners again. History repeats. We already see them abducting and holding foreigners in China as pawns in a political game. Human life is not that valuable to the CCP. The Chinese, in general, do not look inwards and consider how they can improve themselves. Now at this point, the audio becomes much poorer because the interruptions in filming became so frequent that I decided to stop syncing my external audio source to the video itself because that would just make editing a huge pain in the butt. So please bear with it. The Chinese in general do not look inwards and consider how they can improve themselves. Chinese in general do not look inwards and consider how they Chinese in general do not look in Chinese in general do not look inwards and consider how they can improve themselves. Chinese in general do not look inwards and consider how they can improve themselves. The first inclination they Chinese in general do not look inwards and consider how they can improve themselves. The first inclination is to attack others and take what they have. You can see why communism worked out so well there. Once again, I know this is not a very nice video. I'm sure if you're Chinese, it seems very insulting. I apologize for that, but to be honest, this is very pertinent, important information for the rest of the world to learn. Thanks for watching. Thanks for watching. Chinese in general do not look inwards and consider how they can Chinese in general do not look inwards and consider how they can improve themselves. The first inclination they may have Chinese in general do not look inwards and consider how they can improve themselves. The first inclination they have is to attack others and take what they have.